Welcome, everyone, to the F6P NFL DFS kickoff show. I am your host, Keith Flemming. And just like that, with perfect timing, I was about to say my main man, Joe Matz, was not here, but here's Joe the Brain Matz. What's going on, Joe?
Oh, hectic day at school today. Fire alarm. I guess apparently an electrical fire in a sixth period. So
literally fire alarm.
But pretty limited as far as I can tell. And of course, I heard this from a kid that is an electrical fire. So who knows if that's even true?
AKA
but unscheduled regardless. Yeah.
So did you ever do that growing
day,
up, Joe? Did you ever pull the fire alarm?
No, I was always too afraid of the ink, which at some schools seems to be real and at others is because depending on the school, I've seen the kid get inked before, so it's at least sometimes real. Where if you pull it, it shoots off like something on your hand. It's because at some schools it happens enough where you need that to prove who did it. So, and it's like if you do it for a good reason, no one cares. You got ink on your hand, it's whatever. But that way they could catch the perpetrators of the false fire alarms.
It's been so long since I went to school. We didn't have a lot of the fire alarm, but in all seriousness, I told this story, I think, before, if you've been with us for a long time. My senior year, there was 14 bomb threats at my school. And at every single one, we'd have to go outside, which, as you can imagine, like on cold or rainy days, you have a lot of really pissed off people. And once you're, a junior, senior, you can drive to and from school, right? You had about 5 minutes from the second that they said this is a bomb threat to where you could get out of the premises before they kind of locked everyone in. And you want to talk about like friggin' gone in 60 seconds. I mean, oh my God, dude, it was great. And the best thing is like the few times that they would catch you, or try to get onto you, my mom, being the great woman that she is, would be like, there's a bomb there and you expect my kid to stay? He did exactly what I would have done. So anyway, that's not what we're here to do, is talk about fire alarms and bomb threats. But I'm your host, Keith Flemming, my man, Joe the Brain Matz, for the NFL DFS kickoff show on F6P. I want to start off by saying I apologize. I know that my value article is not out. My DFS stacks article will not be out tomorrow. I did not go on ESPN Northwest Florida yesterday. Starting Tuesday, I felt like I had the flu. Luckily, it was not. But I am definitely not 100%. But the show must go on. Thank God for what is the steroid? Prednisone. Definitely starting to feel better. Don't think I'll be getting much sleep tonight. But each week, me and Joe give our favorite value plays. We classify that as a median and a value, 6,900 and below. Last week, the definition of value plays, Joe, we had 3 guys at 3,700 or lower that scored 12.3 points or more, and Jaden Reed. And then, boy, how about the tight end position? Jake Ferguson, David Njoku. So really good stuff by us. We'll continue to try to give you those kind of plays, but we don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Let's get right into the QBs. Full discretion, I suck at QBs this year, and it really does drive me crazy, Joe, because I'm having one of my better all-around years I've had since many of you have been doing this. But, man, I can't hit a freaking QB. Like, no matter who it is or how confident I am, it's like, nah, it's not going to happen. So this week I'm just going cheap with both of them. My median is very low, and my volume is even lower, but give me Bryce Young, 5,100 versus Indy for technically, again, my median, which is really just a value. He's really starting to come along, which is good for the Carolina Panthers, who picked him number 1. Through his first 4 weeks, he only had 2 touchdowns in his 3 starts, averaging 10 points per game on DK. Since then, 5 touchdowns, a lot better, 16 points per game. Indy is just not a great defense, but they're really bad. Actually, they're really bad versus running backs and quarterbacks, but they're 29th versus opposing QBs on DK. That's 3rd worst at the NFL, not good. And this is despite a fairly easy list of QBs. We haven't got into this as much this year on the show, but one thing me and Joe like to do is you got to look past the numbers. And sometimes a team can be even worse than you think when you see the list of like QBs they've played, or they can be better, right, if they've had a murderer's row. And this is definitely one of those that they're worse because they played Lawrence twice. We'll give you that, even though T-Law hasn't been all that great. Lamar has, without a doubt, been a fantasy freak. Then you had C.J. Stroud making his 2nd start ever. He scored 25.46. Stafford in his last game without Cooper Kupp scored over 20 points. And then again, they are 29th, despite Ryan Tannehill scoring 10 points on them. PJ Walker scoring 5. Last week, Carr scored 22.3. There's a lot of room to score on this Indy team, and I'm going to get into why I think Carolina is going to have a really hard time stopping Indy's run game. So I think they're going to be down and throwing, which is always a good thing. I also love Young's rush for 10 yards or more. 4 of his last 6. Those are free points. I think he's had 30 plus in one game. So there's some real value there. And again, I just think that Moss and JTT are going to have a field day against a very bad Carolina run defense, which is just going to be more opportunities for Bryce, who has looked a lot better. And I think there's some upside with him this week.
I like that. I know Bryce Young's obviously struggled for most of this season, but I remain a long-term Bryce Young optimist.
Very talented dude.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously saw more than most of us being in SEC country. So, yeah, that guy, I trust him and that coaching staff to figure it out, and they are hopefully going to continue on the upswing here. I did not go as nearly as cheap as you.
I've just been playing your QBs anyway, Joe. So whoever you got, I'm good with it, buddy.
Well, I'm going Dak at 6,500. Kind of a weird slate this week because of some of the buys and the Monday night, Sunday night games where you have
Stupid
Lamar and Jalen
Chiefs
Hurts
and Dolphins being overseas.
Right,
It's like, come on, there's 2 offenses I need.
I know. I'm going to be in Vegas this weekend, and so I'm interested to see just how packed the sports book is at the start of that game, because
people won't be going to bed.
Yeah, I think that one's going to get everybody real quick. But yeah, quarterbacks, we have 2 guys over 8,000, and then there's no one till you hit Dak. So Dak is kind of a high-priced median guy in that sense this week at 6,500. But, again, Dak's another guy where he takes so much more shit than he deserves because he's the Cowboys quarterback. Listen, this is both good and bad. He's Kirk Cousins with more mobility. Guess what? As we saw for most of this season with Kirk Cousins, if you give them talent and good coaching, good things will happen. Obviously, question mark with the coaching for this team, but we saw some things against the Rams, particularly moving CeeDee Lamb around the formation, using him more as the X on the outside rather than the slot guy. That really seemed to open things up. I mean, by far the best game that Dak's had this season, or this offense has had. 4 touchdowns, 300 yards against the Rams, who had been playing reasonably well. Now we get the Philadelphia Eagles. Upside to this game, no, the Eagles' defense isn't trash, but it's also not the level it was last year.
It's a treasure trove of QBs and receivers, and it was last year too.
Right. Last year, it was really good, but you could get enough points because you were dropping back 40 times. This year, it's still a good defense, but the back end has not been nearly as sharp. If you do some like bunch trips formations, that's really caused some problems with this defense because they're breaking in a lot of new starters on that back end. Even Kevin Baird, who's an upgraded safety, it's still his second week on the team. Things are not running as smoothly as you'd like. And then last year when Dak played this team, 347 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 40-34 win for Dallas. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a similar game. I don't know if we're getting 40 points, but if, a 300 yards and 3 touchdowns is very much in the realm of possibility. The obvious downside is if you're going Dak and you want to pair him with someone, by far the best choice is going to be CeeDee Lamb.
Just shit on my value flex play, Joe. It's okay.
I just don't trust the receivers and the rest of this offense, quite frankly.
I mean, it is my play, but I'm just kidding, buddy. You're right. I mean, receptions and targets he's had, for sure. It is. If you're going to play Dak, I think you should probably put him with Lamb.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can afford it and you're doing the Dak one, obviously go with Lamb. But yeah, obviously you're going to eventually tell us why it's worth taking the risk on some of these other guys who are obviously Brandon Cooks, much cheaper.
Spoiler warning.
So I still think it's a totally reasonable play to pair him with one of those guys, or again, with Jake Ferguson. But yeah, I think this is a Dak slam play just because, we saw him do it against the exact same defense last year. I think this is defense's worst this season. And potentially, hopefully, in this case, as a Giants fan, hopefully not, maybe this coaching staff is figuring out some things to open things up and make Dak's job easier. And also just feeding the ball to CeeDee Lamb because he's awesome.
And a lot of changeover, which to their credit, like I don't know why we don't talk about that enough. New offensive coordinator, that's a big deal for a quarterback. A lot of new weapons, new running back, new receivers, and all of a sudden you look the last 2 weeks, Dak's starting to look a lot more like Dak. And just again, in the irony of you probably should not play my QB plays from this show, I go every Wednesday on ESPN Northwest Florida. I gave Dak as my medium play and then shifted to CJ Stroud, which that didn't work out so well for me for this show. So sorry if you were all in with CJ Stroud with me. But my value this week, let's go to the homer corner. Give me Taylor Heineke for my Atlanta Falcons. It's really pretty simple. Falcons are loaded with offensive weapons. You know, I mean, Ritter, I tried to defend him. You turn it over 7 times in 10 quarters. What can you do? But the big thing is he was scoring points. I mean, he'd scored 16.8 points or more on DK in 4 of his last 6 full games played. And the Falcons, you know, back up Heineke, he scored 12.4 points in kind of a bad situation where I don't think he expected to go in versus Tennessee. Drake London was hurt. Like, there was a lot of things going against him. He still scored 12.4 points. And I'll go ahead and give you another spoiler warning. Bijan Robinson is going to be my flex median play. Right. The reason for it, Heineke in 2022, his target percentage or target rate to running backs, almost 25%. That makes me feel very good in a game that potentially Drake London's not going to be playing, that he's going to be throwing it to Bijan that much. To back that up, Bijan had 4 of his 5 targets in the 1 half with Heineke last week. And again, he moved the ball with Hodges and Hollins. They didn't even really hit Pitts, which I think they'll get him more involved if London is out. But I think at 5,000, he's a real value. We know he'll use his legs. And we went through this last year. Is Heineke going to score 30-plus points? Absolutely not. But I think he can absolutely score 20-plus. And at that 5K range, why not take a chance and then build your lineup like I like to do with expensive receivers, you know, maybe a running back here and there, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was kind of bad luck last week because you clearly got proven right on the matchup.
Yep.
So I'm buying Keith stock on QBs. That's what I'm saying. I think I think this is the week you bust out. It's going to work. Again, not going super cheap. I'm 5,800. Sam Howell against the New England Patriots. Big thing for Sam Howell is he just drops back a ton.
Good Lord.
With 365 dropbacks so far this season, easily the most. And you know it's the most because he's up there in attempts, even though he's taking a sack every 5 dropbacks. So, I mean, Godspeed. I hope his body continues to hold up through this.
It's like the modern day Rocky, man.
He really is. He's a small QB who's just taking hits left and right. And yeah, a lot of them are his fault because he doesn't read the field quick enough. But hey, the important thing is he keeps dropping back. He keeps making throws, and he can make the throws. That's the thing.
No, he can throw.
It's not like he lacks talent. He just lacks certain talent that prevents him from getting hit. But anyway, the Patriots, you know, solid defense, super banged up though in their secondary. Obviously, this is not the lineup that we saw those first few weeks when this looked like a potentially elite defense. And Sam Howell, much better against man. Patriots run the 7th most man coverage. Howell's big-time throw rate by PFF nearly doubles against man versus zone. And then his turnover-worthy throw rate actually drops very slightly. So you're getting the same amount of downside risk with double the amount of upside risk. So I also kind of think this is a higher scoring game than maybe people are expecting. I think the fact that they traded away their 2 starting edge rushers
could be a problem.
Could be a problem. Could be very helpful to opposing offenses, which just means more Sam Howell dropbacks. So to me, I think this is potentially a Patriots win where Sam Howell gives us 250, 300 yards and a couple scores because he might actually have to keep up with Mac Jones in this game because I think this defense is going to take a pretty solid drop-off here, minus Chase Young and Montez Sweat.
Yeah, a defense that was great last year has been awful this year, even with getting consistent pressure. So now you're taking away the pressure. So it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure out that's probably not going to work out too well. Also, real quickly before we get on the running backs, I want to thank the Keith and Joe curse of talking about how disappointing Johan Dotson has been on the show last week, and then he goes out and has over 100 yards, 8 catches, and a touchdown. So it's good to see we still got it, Joe. Running backs. For me, this is like one of the slam dunks this week. He'll be in probably every lineup. Jonathan Taylor, 6,400 at Carolina. They're 31st on DK versus the run. I don't think people understand how bad Carolina is. They've allowed 130 rushing yards to every single team they've played this year. And they've already given up 14 rushing touchdowns. 14. They've already had their bye. They're allowing 4.7 yards per carry. That's not good. I think it's fifth worst in the NFL. 5 running backs have already finished top 5 on DK for the week when facing them. Again, they've had their bye, so that's 5 top 5 backs in 7 weeks. Not good. And the big thing is, let's look at Taylor's snap share and route participation the last 4 weeks and how he's been getting ramped up. Came back week 5, had 15%. 3.7 in the passing game. Week 7, 43% snap share, 34 in the route. 7, 52%, 44% route participation. And then last week, the highest in both, 60% in his snap share, 53 in the route. In those 2 games, last 2 games, 7 red zone carries, 217 total yards. The big thing, the first 2 weeks, he only had 14 carries, more than double that. And his last 2 having 30 carries. And it shouldn't surprise you. It's the exact opposite for Moss, who has gone down each week that Taylor's gone up to the point to where the last 2 weeks he was down to a 36% snap share, only saw 25% of the route participation. And in his last 2 games, almost half the red zone carries with 4 and considerably less yards with 136. The other big thing, Taylor is 6th in yards per touch this season. He's a much more explosive back. I mean, Jonathan Taylor was the number 1 pick in fantasy last year for a reason across the board. I know it didn't work out for anybody who did that, but I really like Taylor this week. I would be shocked if he doesn't have his breakout game versus an awful Panthers team, which, like I said, I do think the Panthers are going to be able to score in Indy because the Browns scored almost 40 points with their running back getting hurt and PJ Walker at QB versus this team. So you can score on Indy. I just think Taylor has a big day. I don't hate Moss either, but I think Taylor's the one to go with.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm co-signing the Taylor pick, but also I would throw in that I think Moss is still a totally reasonable play. Like, if you happen to like other plays more and then you're like, oh, I would like to get one of these Colts running backs in and you need that $600 to get dropped down to Moss, I think it's totally fine. Again, I think your point, Taylor is ramping up, especially when you look at the carries the last couple of weeks. He's more and more the guy. Again, you don't give a guy, $13, $14 million a year unless
running
you're
back especially. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not Moss isn't out these snaps because Moss isn't playing well. Like last week, it was 11 carries for 66 yards and a score against the New Orleans defense that's been pretty good this season. So yeah, like we say every single week, Carolina, horrific against the run. We always want to be targeting.
They're this year's Chargers from last year.
They are. And it's not even like this year's Chargers are great. But but yeah, to me, this is get one of these guys in your lineup, preferably Taylor. But yeah, if you need that $600 because you love someone else at another position and you need that money, I think Zach Moss is getting 10 plus carries. I think he's getting 50 plus yards. Good chance he scores. So, and also the other thing, we never root for it, but if either of these guys gets hurt, the other guy immediately becomes a top 5 running back play this week, regardless of salary. So all in on the Colts backs.
Yeah. And the Millie Maker, I don't even hate having both Colts running backs.
Yeah.
Pass your backs and then maybe run back Bryce with Thielen if he ends up playing like it looks like he will. Because again, these defenses stink. Like both of them. It's hard to fathom the Colts gave up 39 points to that Browns offense 2 weeks ago. My value
to be fair, I think there were some fumble recoveries for touchdowns.
There was, but still, man, come on, dude. Deshaun Watson threw a pick and he only was on there. I think he threw 4 passes, but the value is a very safe play. It's Kareem Hunt, 5,500 versus Arizona. Led the trio of Browns in touches last week and snaps. Again, it's not a great situation when a guy's one of 3 backs. I get that. But again, this is another horrible rush defense. The Cardinals, they're 30th versus opposing running backs on DK. If you want to go with Ford, who is cheaper, I like that. I don't even hate Pierre Strong necessarily. But again, the more healthy Ford is, which he's practicing fully this week, which he did not last week, I just think he's going to be more involved along with Hunt. Cardinals are 30th again versus opposing DBs, but Hunt, 13.7 points or more in 3 straight, scored a touchdown in every one of those games, 4 overall, and he's seen at least 3 red zone carries in all 3 games. And that's the big deal why I just love Kareem Hunt. Obviously, if I'm doing FanDuel, I love Kareem Hunt. Is just he's gonna get the ball in the red zone. We saw that when they had Nick Chubb for years, which was so frustrating for people like me that had Nick Chubb on their fantasy teams, and they would let him run it all the way down the field and then put Kareem Hunt inside the 5. But Arizona, again, bad team. And remember what's going on. That Kyler Murray may not start. Josh Dobbs is gone. I don't know what Arizona is going to look like. So the Browns, the Browns could be up big. They could be running. I think Hunt's a very safe play at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. This seems like a game where, the Browns should absolutely be in control the entire time. So that bodes super well. I'm going to go with my old buddy, Darrell Henderson Jr.
I almost went with him.
I was so angry with myself that I didn't end up picking him up in any of my actual leagues. I know he hasn't been super productive so far. And also we know Stafford might not play in this game. There is some risk there. We're obviously hoping across the board that Stafford plays.
For somebody that's Puka in every league, yeah.
Because that's the really frustrating thing is I feel like if Stafford's in this game, obviously price-wise, it doesn't really matter for our podcast, but you're really liking I got to get one of those Rams receivers into my lineups. And as is, it's hard to really buy into either of those guys. Again, at those price ranges, the upside is Darrell Henderson is 5,100. He has 30 carries the last 2 weeks, plus 4 receptions. So he's seeing consistent playing time in an offense where, we've seen this offense work, 2 years ago, where 3 years ago when Goff was there, he got hurt. John Wolford came in. And we're like, who's John Wolford? And they looked fine. They didn't blow people out, but they still scored points because Sean McVay is an offensive genius. If you're the Packers, they always seem to be inclined to try and stop the passing game first, which generally I would say is the good move. And especially if the other team has Puka and, the white Jesus after McCaffrey, the white Jesus of receivers. So, the focus is going to still be on them, I think, even if Stafford doesn't play. But I think you see a heavier dose of the run game if Stafford isn't there. And, it's just a Packers defense that, I don't know, going back for 5 years, 8 years, I don't remember the last time the Packers defense was good against the run. I legitimately don't. I remember 4 years ago as the Niners threw 9 passes in a conference championship game and got to the Super Bowl. And I know they've changed defensive coordinators since then, and it doesn't seem to make a huge difference. This is a team that's giving up, let's see, I didn't do the math earlier, but 185 points on DK through 7 games to running backs. So it's not a defense that stops the run. They've also given up 42 receptions so far to opposing running backs.
3 points.
So, that's a solid 6 points per game just on receptions. So at 5,100, he's the play for me for the Rams as long as Stafford is out.
I love it. And one day, Joe, when we have more time, you can explain to me what the hell is going on with them putting him to the practice squad every Monday and confusing fantasy owners like me who picked Henderson up than to just see him. Luckily, I did not drop him, but
it's one of those things where I forget exactly how it works because the Giants have been doing that with the punt return because we finally decided we should have a professional punt returner on our NFL football team. But we put him back to the practice squad and it was like, what the fuck's going on? And it's it's just some procedural thing where you can do that, I think 3 times.
Yeah, this is the last time you could. I read that today.
Right. So if you keep doing it, I think you keep the option open to leave them on the practice squad. Whereas I think once you activate them, there might be some, you can't put them back.
It's probably
everything. I think it's something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Wide receivers. Give me Nico Collins for my median. For whatever reason, and I just go by the numbers. He's a different guy at home compared to away. It was that last year. I actually went back and looked. He had considerably more points per game at home last year than indoors. Now, granted, in the disparity this year. When I say there's disparity this year, in his 4 away games, he's averaging 8.3 points per game on DK. In his 3 home games, over 27 points per game. Tampa Bay is 24th versus opposing wide receivers on DK. Versus number 1 receivers this year, and this is why I'm really high on Collins, 52 receptions. That's 7.4 per. I'm just talking about versus number 1 receivers. 686 yards. That is 98 yards per game. 4 number 1 receivers have finished top 5 on DK for the week at that position facing Tampa. And Tampa runs a very similar amount of zone and gets a very similar amount of pressure rate to Indy, who Collins, we know, torched earlier this season for 30-plus points. I think this is a get-right game for a Houston offense. And Tampa Bay's been good against the run, which is the other thing. So they don't have the ability to run anyway, but they've been able to do it more lately because of some of the teams they're playing. I think they get back to throwing it. I really think Collins has a huge day. I was going to give Stroud, but I'm not doing it after I was so all in on it last week and you let me down. But Nico Collins is my median wide receiver.
No surprise. Completely agree. He's also been on that like every other game thing.
I like that.
Where every second game he scored double digits. Twice he scored 30 points. And then I'm a silly person who just looks at that and forgot to actually just check if it was just home games like you just brought up. And then, but yeah, every odd week he's had 1 double digit scoring game and no blow up games. So this is their 8th game. So there you go. Slam Nico. I just think, I mean, he's the guy too, where we talk about the zone splits, the man splits. He's been super productive both ways. I think Nico Collins is a legit, if not already number 1 receiver, like soon to be number 1 receiver. So yeah, I'm all in. I co-signed that one. I'm going to have to bump up my flex wide receiver play because otherwise I was going to end up copying you on both of these guys because I also love the guy you're about to talk about.
Well, if you want to go with him, go for it. For real.
Oh no, you take it. I've got another cheap guy that I'm happy to throw out.
All right. Well, Demario Douglas is my play. He's going to be in every lineup this week. He should be in every lineup this week. 4K versus Washington. This happens very rarely. There's that perfect storm of situation, and this is it. He's going to, Kendrick Bourne is on IR. He is not going to be there. So he is going to be New England's unquestioned number 1 receiver. From a talent perspective, you could say maybe he already was. He's seen 13 targets and caught 9 passes the last 2 weeks. And again, Bourne didn't get hurt until the second half of the game this last week. So he was already becoming more involved, led all wide receivers for New England in snaps last week. He's 19th among wide receivers in target rate, 11th in target separation, 23rd in average cushion. He's a talented dude. And Washington is just awful versus wide receivers. They're 31st on DK. Number 1 wide receivers have 44 receptions versus Washington just over their last 6 games. 5 of those 6 number 1 receivers have caught 8 or more passes. And number 1 wide receivers in that 6-game span averaging 141 yards per game. Again, this is just number 1 receivers and 7 touchdowns. And as Joe so beautifully put just a few minutes ago, they lost their best 2 pass rushers by a mile. You know what helps guys get open? When you can't get pressure. I think Demario Douglas needs to be in every line. It doesn't mean he's going to have a great game. Mac Jones is Mac Jones. New England is New England.
Shit can happen.
This is too good of a value. We look every week for these guys that are 4K and below, so that way you can, spend on the guys you want to. This is a guy that could legit be a top 5 receiver this week easily when you look at Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be the number 2 option for New England other than their tight ends and running backs. It's also why I almost included Ramondre Stevenson because I'm sure he's going to get peppered with targets. But I love Demario Douglas this week.
Yeah. Like you said, everything you said, plus, Kendrick Bourne was the only other good wide receiver on this team. And he's gone now.
And he was putting up consistent points. So Mac Jones was at least able
Kendrick
to make
Bourne's
him
a good player. So, but the fact that you remove him now, that's just a vacuum to me where there isn't a lot of good places to go with the ball now because it's just not a very talented receiver group, except for Douglas, who has shown a lot of promise so far as a rookie. My brother's a Patriots fan, so he was, even before I was reading up on this week, he was like, yeah, thank God for Douglas, because otherwise, what is there? I will go with a guy who I wish I'd talked about last week because he had a huge game. Rashid Shaheed, 4,500 for the New Orleans Saints against the Chicago Bears. Only 3 targets last week. He caught all 3 for 153 yards and a score.
He's a beast, man.
Which, I mean, the thing with that receiver group is, I mean, with him and Olave anyway, Thomas is just, solid, but the speed that those guys have, it's so hard for a team to hold up.
New Orleans offense can be really good if Carr's arm continues to improve.
Right. It's all dependent on Carr, because now Kamara's back. Teams have to respect Kamara, both running the ball and receiving the ball. Olave is a legit number 1. Thomas is still very solid, like I said. And Shaheed is just an absolute burner. And yeah, you get a Bears defense, 31st against 31st against DVOA against the pass. 18th on DK, which a lot of that is just teams touchdowns. Don't always have to pass. Right. Touchdowns, and teams don't always have to pass against the Bears because they're usually winning against the Bears. And God, looking through this receiver group this week, there was so many almost. It was like if DJ Moore had a healthy Justin Fields, he'd be one of my plays. Or if Marquise Brown had a legit quarterback to face the Browns defense, I'd be like,
if something happens that Kyler Murray,
it's like, he's good against man coverage, except this is one of the best defenses, and Clayton Tune is the quarterback, so that's worthless. So there were so many that I liked, and I just kind of had to throw out. But Shaheed, legitimately good. Points per game or points per route run against zone coverage, which the Bears are 11th in zone and 20th in man, so they are primarily a zone team. He leads the team in points per route run, edging out Olave, who's also very solid. So again, and he's a guy where, again, last week it was 3 targets and it got us 150 yards in a score. The week before, he had 8 targets. So it's not like the 3 target thing is we're stuck here. This is all he's ever going to see. I mean, 3 of the previous 4 weeks, he saw 6 or more targets. So it's not that he won't see the ball. It's just that sometimes he only needs 3. And again, and then this is also a defense where, per the charting on FTN, 58 yards per game, 2 wide receiver number 3s. That is 27th in the NFL. So pretty bad, which is exactly what we are obviously looking for. And then 29th in DVOA on deep passes, which is also exactly what we're looking for. So I'm all in on the Douglas one. I actually like that. Again, this is actually really my flex play. But I think, hey, if you want to go cheap on both those guys, get both those receivers in there for 8,700.
Mm-hmm.
I feel good about it. And then maybe I'm going to be at the Raiders-Giants game. And last year I went to the Raiders-Colts game. I saw the only Jeff Saturday win for the Colts. And so now I'm worried because the Raiders just fired their coach. And so I might see the only Antonio Pierce win for the Raiders, in which case that means Devontae Adams is probably going to absolutely roast the Giants in front of me. So maybe he's the guy you save money for.
O'Connell with them, naming him the starter immediately, which was kind of surprising. But
and the key thing there is they have a pretty good interior line,
mm-hmm.
and that's what you need to have against the Giants because Dexter Lawrence is playing insane right now. He has had 15 pressures against the Jets, which is that's legitimately like
if you're not Jalen Carter, that's
and JJ Watt do stuff like that. The 2 highest graded defensive tackles on PFF. There you go. Jalen Carter and Dexter Lawrence. But then Raiders, good interior offensive line. So, hey, maybe Aiden O'Connell is not a bad play this week.
All right, the tight ends. I hate doing this because he drives me crazy. But I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Give me Taysom Hill, 4,700 versus Chicago. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm just like, maybe Carr is also a play this week at QB. But he scored 12.3 points or more in 3 straight. He's averaging 17.2 points per game in that span. That will be second among tight ends, by the way, for those last 3 weeks. even though if you look on DK Live, he's still listed under quarterbacks, which is just, again, in itself, something really funny. But in those 3 weeks, he finished 6th among tight ends, week 6 and 7th, and then last week 3rd. This is just absurd. He's seen 70% of his targets for the season in the last 3 games and has 75% of his receptions. And then on top of that, he's still seen 15 rush attempts in those 3 games. There's not a safer play. He's not outrageously priced. Chicago's awful. And there's a good chance New Orleans is going to get in the red zone a good bit. And we saw last week again, because I had Kamara in every lineup. He had a great game, but of course they gave it to Hill on the 1-yard line, costing Kamara 6 points. So I'd be shocked if he doesn't get 10 points, because now he's catching receptions like consistently. I mean, he's easy money because he can bust a 50-yard. He's the only tight end in football who can bust a 50-yard run anytime or get a goal line carry. So I'm going with it. I don't like it because I hate the Saints. I don't like the way they use Hill, but give me Taysom Hill for my median tight end.
My favorite play always with the Saints is when they just decide, like, let's have Taysom Hill throw deep.
Yeah.
Which maybe with Carr it makes some sense. But I just remember when they were playing the Giants a couple years back, and it was the Jameis year. And I was like, Jameis's problem has never been throwing the ball deep. So I don't know why you're throwing in this other guy to do it. And he threw a pick, which was awesome.
I was going to say the one guy could possibly throw a pick at a higher percentage than James Winston.
Right. So super, super weird choice to me, but, always happy to see it. I'm going to go Dalton Kincaid at
play.
Where was his price tag? Of course, I've missed it somewhere in here. Why am I losing him on my list here? I didn't mess up. And is he on a Sunday night game?
Oh, he is.
No, he's not. Yeah, he is. I have the wrong DK list pulled up then because I.
Well, go ahead and tell him why Donald Kincaid should be the showdown play. Because when you said it, I'm going, damn, Keith, I can't believe you missed that.
Yeah, because I must have clicked on the wrong one, because when I make my final choices, I'm always looking at it on DK.
So somebody pulled a fire alarm at the school today. It was pandemonium. You don't have to explain this to anybody.
I mean, it's pretty simple for Dalton Kincaid. Last 2 weeks, 13 receptions on 15 targets, 140 yards and a score. So he has seen the ball because, again, Knox is gone. This was a team that could run a lot of 2 tight end, and now they don't need to because, now they can't. Right. And so he just gets all of it. Again, this was a guy where people were talking him up. Like, obviously, everyone would always be like, listen, I'm not saying it, but I kind of am saying it. He reminds me of Travis Kelce. That was the thing that kept coming up in the actual NFL draft.
Nobody wanted to be on record saying it, but they were saying
it. No one was like, he will be him. But it was like, the player he most reminds me of. And then, the Bengals have not been good against tight ends. 27th in yards per game to tight ends at 58.9. So again, bad, and that's all it is. And also Joe Burrow might be back. The Bengals might just be good again.
By the way, Alan, if you're listening, you owe him an apology and me. He couldn't move. He was injured. Oh God, he beat up on your boy.
And then it's like, he comes back.
Looks pretty good.
Pretty dang good again.
When they're in the conference title game again, you can call me crazy for thinking he's the best QB in the league. But anyway, I know.
Yeah, but the point is, the Bengals should be back to scoring points regularly, which means you have to pass. And I legitimately think Kincaid is the second best option in this offense. Obviously, Stephon Diggs is far and away always number one.
And Gabe Davis, I continue to leave on my bench each week, and all he does is score 20 points. But, Gabe
Davis is the guy where I feel like if I say anything good about him, he's going to do terrible.
I'm like, I know if I put him
won't,
at this
and
point,
feel free to take
me. And it just, each week, I'm like, God.
So a quick alternate, David Njoku. He came through for me last week. This Cardinals defense, a lot of soft zones. You don't even need Deshaun Watson to come back because I guess apparently he threw it with zip today. Hooray! We'll see if he comes back. But regardless, this is not a good defense.
Beautiful thing, Joe. It really
I enjoy it. So hey, I would love it if the Cardinals shocked me and they won this game. That would be my favorite thing ever. If the Cardinals went 2-15 and the only teams they beat were the Cowboys and the Browns, that would be my ultimate. That would just be beautiful to me. But they probably won't. Again, super soft zone. Njoku's a talented guy. The Browns obviously realized it last week. He came through against that Seattle defense that I continue to think is kind of fool's gold against tight ends. So don't be afraid to put Mark Andrews in this week. But yeah, David Njoku, 3,800. But if you're playing outside the core Sunday games, Dalton Kincaid, throw him in there.
Showdown lineups. My value, K-Dot and 3K. Again, just really safe play at his price. 9 reception, 12 targets his last 2 games. He's seen 4 more targets in 4 of his last 6. 6 or more in half of those. Among tight ends, this was kind of shocking to look up. He's first in snap share, 7th in routes run, 4th in route participation, 100% of contested catches he's caught so far. And the Texans, good God, do they struggle with tight ends. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. They are giving up the most targets to tight ends, almost 8.86 per game, and the most receptions at 7 per. They're giving up 7 receptions per game to tight end. And now you're playing Cade Otton, who's basically the only tight end that's ever on the field for the Bucs. So I think he's a really safe play at 3K and a little unlucky because he has not scored a touchdown this year. Maybe this is the week.
Yeah, I like that play a lot. I'm going to go with our old pal Logan Thomas, 3,500. Again, that's the upside to playing doing the Sam Howell thing is the most expensive guy is Terry McLaurin, and he's not even that expensive this year. But yeah, you have a lot of cheap options. Again, big upside to Logan Thomas. He's the clear number 1 tight end on this team. And
he's a clear number 1 tight end. We said it 3 weeks ago. Like, go pick him up. He is number 1 tight end.
No one is dropping back more than Sam Howell as the Washington QB, which means Logan Thomas has 232 routes run. That's the 8th highest in the NFL this season. So 33 routes per game. He's not staying in to block a ton. Even if he does 5 or 6 times a game, there's another 35 chances because they're throwing 40 passes a game. Route participation, 12th among all tight ends. So again, that's all fringe tight end 1 stuff. Last week, it came through target-wise, not a lot of yards, 44 yards, but 6 receptions, had a touchdown. And that's actually back-to-back weeks where he's hit 40 yards, he's hit 4 receptions, he's hit 6 targets. And, we've seen him have the huge target game. He went 9 for 11, 77 yards against the Bears. And like I said before, I think this Patriots defense is banged up. It's not what it was at the start. And I think because of the trades that Washington has made, their defense is not the same either, which means more Patriots points, more Sam Howell dropbacks. It all works together. So Logan Thomas, 3,500.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm 100% co-signing with you. I think that's going to be a sneaky point scoring affair. And I might even have Johan Dotson, who we talked so bad about last week, who went out and had his best game. Maybe he's back. All right, the flex. Bijan Robinson should be in a majority of your DK lineups this week. He is 6,100 versus Minnesota. I need to first remind you that Minnesota, I guess, is going to start Dobbs. I don't know what they're going to do, but they're either going to start a quarterback that they just traded for, who basically doesn't truly know the offense, or they're going to be starting a guy that it's not going to be good. Bijan has reached kind of a ridiculous price for both his talent and for his production. I mean, this is a guy that scored at least 12.3 points in every game except for the shit show that was Tampa Bay in the headache game or whatever it was. In the passing game, this is the real reason why, to me, he's a slam dunk this week, averaging 5.28 targets per game, 4.3 receptions. And again, Heineke, the Falcons look good in the second half. There's a ton of talent on Atlanta's roster. And if you look at it, when Ritter was not fumbling the ball or throwing an interception every other play, we moved the ball with much consistency. But this is the reason why you love me and Joe. We're huge nerds. I went back and looked last year. Taylor Heineke threw 259 passes. 64 of those went to running backs. That is 24.3%. 4 of Bijan's 5 targets last week came in the second half with Taylor Heineke as the QB. By the way, Bijan scored his first rushing touchdown in forever. And overall, 5 of Heineke's 21 passes last week went to running backs. Guess what percentage that is? 23.8%. If you're telling me Bijan's going to get 20, because let's say he's going to maybe 5% of the passes go to Algier or Cordell, but 20% of Heineke's passes are going to Bijan Robinson, and we know he's going to probably get 5-10 carries. And then, the big thing is if Drake London doesn't play, this needs to be a smash play. Because who are you going to throw it to? You're going to throw it to Hodges? You're going to throw it to Hollins? I'm assuming Pitts will get a little bit more, but I'm telling you, I know Minnesota's D's been good. They really have. The last couple of weeks, they've been really good. But you know what? Can be really tough to stop. A guy like Bijan Robinson, when he gets the ball in any kind of open space, I think he has a monster game this week. I really do. And I think his floor is extremely high because I'd be shocked if he doesn't catch at least 5 passes and hopefully scores a touchdown.
Yeah, just for the sake of all Bijan fantasy owners, I certainly hope you're right, because it's just every week I just see it's either my roommate, it's Alan, it's someone on Twitter losing their mind.
Arthur Smith at this point is messing with us because when Cordell Patterson started getting carries, I'm going, dude, come on.
Like Arthur Smith, legitimately.
Carter, what the fuck are you doing?
You legitimately wonder sometime, you're like, is he actually more focused on just trolling everyone?
He's got the money to, in his defense. He
does have the money.
I'm a billionaire. Screw you guys.
I'm gonna keep it rolling with the Washington picks and go with scary Terry McLaurin.
Yes, I had him and changed it, so I'm so glad you have him on here because he is slowly starting to really cook.
Because 5,600 again. This is a guy who 6,400 week 1. Which was him coming off of the turf toe injury.
Well, I was going to say, the first few weeks, it makes a lot of sense in hindsight.
It's weird to me because even weeks 2 through 4, double digits every single game. Like since week 1, he's had one game where he didn't score 10 points. It was 8.9. So it wasn't even like a total whiff of a game. Last 3 weeks, 17 receptions on 32 targets.
That's the big thing. You give that dude that many targets.
Only the one touchdown. Well, only the one touchdown in that time span, 2 on the year. But again, that's one of those things where you're seeing that number of targets. You're catching the ball often enough because it's not like he's actually bad at football. It's a freak thing that he hasn't had more touchdowns. It's also a freak thing that he hasn't gotten us 100 yards. In the last 5 weeks, he's hit 81, 86, and 90. So he's been right on the cusp of giving us that bonus. PFF 75.2 on their wide receiver versus cornerback advantages. And again, some of the guys ahead of him, I would love to play. But again, it's Puka. It's Cooper Kupp. Well, again, the guys we can't even talk about because they're too priced. But the guys that I'm more wary of.
It's scary. Yeah.
Like most of the guys ahead of him on this list, on their advantage list, are guys who are in that $7,000 plus range, give or take a Nico Collins, who we've already talked about.
Not to interrupt you, but just I think that's a great point. That look at last week. Yes, I know Will Levis and Hopkins had a monster game, but look at the rest of the QBs that were backups or put in late, and then what those offensive did. Nothing. They did nothing.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend staying away from those teams unless you feel really good about it. Like seriously, because you're playing with fire. It's the same reason the NFL, good teams have good quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's surprisingly it works out that way. So again, and Drake London is actually also on this list. I just want to mention because that's a guy you could potentially obviously make a pairing with your QB pick there. So I think McLaurin has one of the biggest advantages because he's actually just legitimately really good. Again, New England defense, that secondary has been banged up all season. Christian Gonzalez, who looked like a star as a rookie, out for the season.
He shut
in
down
the first
Tyreek
month.
Hill, for God's sakes. Nobody.
Yeah, so he looked insane. So banged up secondary. Again, 40 dropbacks per game. Terry McLaurin is good. And at some point, He's giving us that 100-yard touchdown game where he gives us 25, 30 points. Reasonable chance it happens this week. Again, I might just straight up bet the over on this game because, again, I haven't looked at it. I assume it's pretty low because it's Washington versus New England, but I'm not a huge believer in either defense now that Washington, again, traded away 2 legitimate edge rushers.
And New England has lost 2 legitimate, like, all-pro level defenders through injury. So, I mean, again, it's a mash unit. And again, Mac Jones and the Patriots are actually starting to move the ball a little bit. They moved it on Miami last week. Let's finish these flex plays with my value, who you shit on so beautifully earlier, saying you got to pair Dak with CeeDee Lamb. But I am interested in Brandon Cooks this week, 4,400 at Philly. He is, like, I think the most undervalued guy at wide receiver in the last decade. Like, just consistently puts up points, numbers. It took a little while to get there in Dallas, but all of a sudden, don't look now. He scored a touchdown 2 straight games. In PPR leagues, he scored 14.2 points or more in 2 straight games. He's seen 4 more targets in all 6 games he's played this year. The Eagles on this season are allowing 26 targets per game to wide receivers and giving up almost 17 receptions. As you said, for Dak, I think has got a great matchup this week. They're also allowing 1.5 touchdowns per, which that's something Cooks has always excelled at. He's always been a guy that finds the end zone on not a lot of receptions, much like Rashid we're talking about in New Orleans. And just the last 2 weeks, remember, Johan Dotson was in the missing persons list. Like, there was flyers up on billboards and corners, and he goes out and has 8 catches over 100 yards and a touchdown. The last 2 weeks, number 2 receivers, 14 receptions for over 175 yards and a score. I would not be shocked at all if Cook scores again. If you're Philly, of course, the number one thing you're going to try to do, good luck, but is try to take away CeeDee Lamb. I think Cooks has got some real value and a chance to do something this week.
Yeah, like I said, Lamb is the safe play, but again, if Dak is throwing for 250, 300 yards and a couple of scores, like I think he will, like he did last year, it's not going to just be CeeDee Lamb. And obviously the price point between CeeDee and every single other guy who can catch passes on this offense is humongous. So I like that one as well. Even though I did shit on it a little bit earlier.
It's all right.
I'll go to a guy who came through big, who came through last week. God, not last year. For us, you specifically, Jaden Reed, 3,600. Very solid, 4 receptions, 83 yards, got us 12 points at actually a higher price point last week against Minnesota. The best player, most productive guy against zone so far this season for the Green Bay Packers. 0.39 points per route run. That's 34th in the NFL. I know that doesn't sound amazing, 34th. But consider this is a guy who costs under $4,000, and he's 34th in league against zone. Rams, they're running the zone 5th most in the entire NFL.
Do they blitz a lot? Because that's the other thing he is just a monster against is teams that blitz a lot.
I do not have those numbers, but
I will tweet.
I will say also that's the other thing here is if Stafford does happen to get cleared, then this becomes a slam play for me because then I think
I'm with you.
We're seeing a lot more points in this game. If he doesn't play, again, still a guy under 4,000 who's on the field a lot. The Packers have constantly.
Remember the red zone targets I told you last week?
Red zone targets,
5,
super heavy.
Red zone, inside 5 red zone targets. Like, it's crazy. They obviously
LaFleur he loves 11 personnel. Again, he's a guy who comes from that McVay tree. Those guys all love 11 personnel. That's why you're seeing even in the red zone, there's 3 wide receivers out there a lot for Green Bay. So he is involved there. He's super cheap. Plus matchup against a Rams secondary that just got wrecked last week by the Cowboys. So, and this is also just a must-win game if Green Bay wants to have any chance to do anything this season. So, Godspeed Green Bay. But yeah, I think Jaden Reed, we're looking at a guy who's pretty consistently gotten those 10 points. Again, 3 of the last 4 weeks. 5 of the last 6, he's scored at least 9, and that included a 19.7-point game against your Atlanta Falcons. So
I'm aware. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. We did win that game.
Well,
so it doesn't hurt
I was going to say you won that game, so I'm allowed to bring it up. But yeah, this is a guy
scored twice actually in that game too, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, a guy who, like you said, he's involved in the red zone last week and then didn't get a touchdown last week. Otherwise, that game is pushing 20 points. Yep. So
he was really
the fact that he's under 4,000 means he's a guy you should constantly be looking at for those matchups. Find the teams that blitz a lot, find the teams that run a lot of zone. If teams do either of those, especially if they do both, you want Jaden Reed in lineups.
Completely agree. All right. Normally, we try to get out of here before the game started. That started 15 minutes ago. But if you were excited about watching if you're excited about watching the Titans Steelers, may God have mercy on your soul. So while we got a few minutes, let's go ahead. What defenses are you looking at this week? Because again, if you've not listened to us talk about defenses, I pretty much think you start at 3,000, you go below, and almost in all situations, that's where you pick it, whether it's a big contest, a cash game, which is what we like to do. But I will say that, again, sometimes there's matchups that are so good, like i.e. Cleveland versus Arizona. If Kyler Murray doesn't start in Cleveland, I might have to try to make the room. Or even New Orleans again at home versus Chicago, when it looks like Fields is not going to play. But if you're not going to spend those, again, I normally never justify it, but I actually think I might think about it. I kind of like Arizona at Cleveland for a defense, because I do think Cleveland's going to win that game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball, but we've seen bad things happen when they throw it. They blew that game that they should have won versus Seattle last week because they got aggressive for reasons I don't totally understand, throwing the ball in the situations they did late in the game. And then outside of that, I do like your New York Football Giants, 2,300 versus Aiden O'Connell, who made the Chargers defense look good last time he made a start. And I think Aiden O'Connell's a talented dude, but those are the two defenses I'm looking at, who, by the way, are facing offenses that are 27th and 28th in points allowed, or I guess it's the opposite, points scored against on DK.
Positive for defenses.
Right.
I'm very similar. Likewise, I think if you're going super cheap, I don't totally understand this Giants price. I'm not going to say like, hey, this is an incredible defense. How dare they?
Did they announce it was after Monday that they announced Garoppolo wasn't going to play, right?
That's true. Because they played.
I think that's what it was. I really do. Because everybody's kind of shocked.
I don't. This Raiders offense has not been good, regardless.
Yeah, you'd want to play the Bears for $200 more versus New Orleans.
Right. I'm attending this game. I told my brother the other day, because he's coming with me. I said, according to DVOA, we're going to go watch the two worst offenses in the NFL play. So now, obviously, if the Giants,
it's like the Super Bowl I went to, remember?
Right.
That's right. It's all of a whopping 17 points.
Yeah. Thrilling game
ever. It's the worst game ever.
But yeah, I know, and again, I know the Giants just traded away Leonard Williams, who's, depending on how you would rank Giants defensive players, the second or third best player in this defense. But it's still a defense that's scored double digits on DK 3 of the last 4 weeks. Yeah, the Miami one's a little fluky because you got a pick 6. But they looked, good against Buffalo, who they only scored 5 on DK, but they gave up 14 points. They gave up 7 points against Washington. They gave up 13 against the Jets, and that was an overtime game where the last 3 points came. So, the last 2 weeks, they've outscored their actual offenses on DK points because they have 26-20. So, Giants defense playing well. You have Aiden O'Connell. I love that. The other one that I really like is the Texans against Tampa Bay for 3,000. Fantastic stat from Nathan Jenke of PFF. Baker Mayfield last 3 seasons against man defense, 14 touchdowns to 5 picks. Against zone defense, 10 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. The Texans run zone at the 8th highest rate in the NFL. Ooh. So, yeah, if you're giving me Baker Mayfield against primarily a zone defense on the road at 3,000, and again, a really well-coached defense, unsurprisingly, under DeMeco Ryans. That defense has been much improved from the last couple of years.
Yeah, I really like
that
franchise. That I still don't think Anderson was worth the pick that they gave up. I don't know if he's
that
kind of difference maker, but it at least like they're way better than I thought. I thought that was going to be a top 5 pick. It's obviously not going to be. The more important thing was they got Stroud right, and maybe it made D'Amico Ryan happy. All right, Josh has asked this question, then we'll get out of here. This is a kind of a tough one. First of all, man, kudos to you, Josh, doing God's work in a 20-team PPR. Good Lord. Aaron Jones and Demario Douglas. Would you trade them for Josh Jacobs and Josh Reynolds? His roster is Lamar, JT, Aaron Jones, Tyreek, Christian Kirk, George Kittle, and Jacoby Myers. That again, because of your running back situation, I understand you just want the consistency of Jacobs. My only concern would be, I think Demario Douglas could end up being a monster guy the rest of the way, especially in PPR, because he's going to get peppered with targets. He is really New England's only receiver left that can create any separation. I think if you weren't listening early, he's 11th in target separation. I have Aaron Jones in several leagues, so I totally get the frustration there. Other concern I would have about Josh Jacobs is just, are they moving to a new era? They've already benched Jimmy G for O'Connell. I know some people in the Raiders, because I'm a Georgia fan, I always keep up with that stuff. They're high on Zamir White. I think he saw, if I am correct, his most snaps he's had all year. But you have such a good roster. I understand going all in. And I mean, when you have Jacoby Myers, Tyreek, Kirk, it's not bad. What do you think, Joe? I know I didn't really even give an answer. I am concerned about giving up Douglas.
It's a tough one because, I mean, God, Aaron Jones is a guy I was really high on coming into the season. And again, I also live with I have 2 roommates, a Patriots fan and a Packers fan, and the Packers fan loses his mind every time they give the ball to A.J. Dillon instead of Aaron Jones.
I know, right?
And yeah, obviously fantasy guys are feeling the same. I think I kind of want to see what the Raiders look like this week. I kind of want to just pump the brakes. I also want to see Douglas, because I think the odds are Douglas improves his value. I don't know what any of these other guys do. Obviously, if Jacobs has a great game against the Giants, then maybe this trade becomes hard to make, and then you missed your opportunity. But I just think the odds are Douglas has a good game, like we talked about. He's our favorite cheap play at wide receiver. And I want to see what the Raiders look like again, because I don't think we see Jimmy G again, potentially, unless they have to play him because O'Connell gets hurt. So yeah,
I'm assuming, Josh, the reason
new offensive play caller,
Jacobs right is the 28 receptions. I'm assuming, because he does get a lot of, because he hasn't. Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy, like the difference in yards per carry between this year and last year. But he does have 28 receptions just this season and 43 targets, which I understand that's very appealing in that. And again, Eric Jones, they keep saying he's not near 100%. Of course, so again, Jones, the last 2 weeks, which he's played more snaps than in recent, he saw 10 targets and had 7 receptions. So I mean, this is why you asked us. I would probably wait. I really would. I'd want to see
the other thing I would say is,
and hope Jones continues to get healthy.
If you and I are right about Douglas and he has a really good game this week, then maybe you can throw someone in. Yep. You can throw in someone who I like more than Josh Reynolds, because Josh Reynolds doesn't do anything for me. Like, if I make that
St. Brown or Laporta on that team, and that's pass catcher.
Right, and if I'm taking a risk on a guy, it's your old guy Jameson Williams, because the potential's there. Reynolds is a guy where if I'm making that trade, it's 50-50. I'm cutting him within a week, so I'd rather wait. Hopefully, we're right about Douglas, and then either you don't make this trade, or you make this trade, but you're adding someone better than Josh Reynolds on as the second player.
Because again, Jones, I know it's been rough, but he has scored 8.6 and 8.7 points the last 2 weeks in PPR.
And it's not like he sucks now. I think,
and Josh Jacobs scored 5.1 and 16.8, so it's not that big of a discretion. And again, it's probably going to get harder for Jacobs to run if they really are going with Aiden O'Connell the rest of the way, which it seems like they are. So anyway, Josh, we appreciate you listening to the show. Again,
thank you very much.
Full disclosure, we are not season-long experts. We're DFS, but we're happy to give our advice.
We play enough fantasy football to have.
Yeah, no, I mean we play, but I just it's like I tell people I don't. But I really am. I'm very high on Demario Douglas the rest of the year. Like I think he's somebody that if he is a vet, would you trade Jacoby for DK? Yeah. What do you think?
Wait, Jacoby for
DK Metcalf.
For DK Metcalf?
I would, right?
I definitely think I would. Again, because
Aiden O'Connell's probably going to be the quarterback.
Right. Aiden O'Connell versus, I know JSN is, moving up in that Seahawks and makes it a little more complicated. But when DK Metcalf is still at
he's
minimum,
running more of Lockett's route, so right? Then he's not doing the same thing.
Metcalf I think Metcalf is still a high-end 2 wide receiver. And so straight up, I like him more than Myers, I think, in general. But all the more so now that the Raiders are going full let's just find out what we have mode. So 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Again, thanks for listening, Josh. Joe, you got anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, not really. I just let me do my one quick little rant, actually.
Sure.
Rant, because this keeps coming up because the college football playoff committee just put out their first rankings. And obviously people may notice that Ohio State is number 1, whereas in the AP and coaches poll, they're number 3. And all I want to say is everyone is correct. And I get frustrated people don't realize it. Listen, the job of the AP and the coaches polls is to guess who is the best team. That's just straight up. It's like, hey, who do you think's the best? You put an answer out there. Georgia, it's won 2 straight titles. They haven't lost this year. The 2 best teams they played so far, they've absolutely crushed. Seems like this team was just kind of like they needed the challenge to really rise to the occasion.
So we haven't lost in 23 games. Yeah, we need some challenge. Come on, rest of college football. Step up a little bit.
So, yeah, and I think Michigan, I would also, if I'm just straight up being asked, who looks better, Michigan or Ohio State? Michigan hasn't played anyone. But
we want it, Joe. I want you to put every team you can in front of them Bulldogs because Kirby is going to have them seething at the mouth of the disrespect that the back-to-back champs are not number 1. I mean, this is
what he should do. But the point is, it's not actually disrespect because
no, it's not. I agree.
Because the playoff committee's job is not actually. I think it's contrary to what some people think. It's not actually to tell us who the best team is, or even
who's had the best season. Correct, is what it is.
Who has earned it so far. And if you've beaten Notre Dame and Penn State, and one of those games is on the road, you've earned it more than anybody else. And
Notre Dame has looked really good. Like Notre Dame is potentially,
as much as Ohio State was 1 play away from losing that game. Yeah, Notre Dame, outside of 1 bad week against Louisville, has looked awesome. So Ohio State should be number 1 in the playoff committee rankings. Nobody is wrong. Now, in 2 weeks, if Georgia has once again crushed their opponents, both of whom are ranked right now, then Georgia moves up and they're number 1 across the board. That's how it should work. But yeah, it frustrates me that people are like, how is Ohio State number 1? It's like, well, because they've played really good teams and they beat them. And Georgia and Michigan haven't really done that yet. So once the schedules even out, then we'll see the AP poll, the playoff poll. They should meet. And most likely they're meeting on Georgia because I don't know that there's anyone I'm picking to beat Georgia right now. So yeah, that's my mini rant. The people don't get worked up.
The SEC title game. I will admit, Alabama scares me. But of course, now they're saying Brock Bowers may return. But you are correct. And again, as a Georgia fan, I hope that they're number 4 going into the playoffs.
Right, you love it.
And they haven't lost because that's just. I mean, Kirby will have a field day.
Right, and every Ohio State fan I've seen talk about it is just kind of like, why are we number 1? What is happening? So yeah, I think everyone is secretly who's not.
They don't want to get fussed out by Ryan Day. That's why the college playoff committee. They don't want to end up like Lou Holtz, Joe. That's what it's really all about. But anyway, well, we have rambled and stumbled and stuttered our way at the end of this, but I hope we have another great week. The picks have been fire. Again, the DFS content, if you are still listening to
across
the very
board,
end, has been just fantastic. I had a blast going on the DFS Den with my man Chris Robin last week, who gave a bunch of bargain plays. My running backs that I gave on that show were unbelievable. The 2 receivers I said you have in cash lineups were A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase. And I pounded Jake Ferguson and Trey McBride at tight end so you could afford them. And I also said Brees Hall. So, I mean, it was a good week. I had a good week on DraftKings myself. But unfortunately in fantasy, just one last thing there for a good chuckle. I lost again in the ESPN Northwest Florida League, this time to my wife. So, oh yeah.
Now you're hearing it at home. That's rough.
Well, not only that, I didn't go on the ESPN show because I was so sick yesterday, and she said I wasn't sick. I just did not want to.
You're hiding.
Grief.
Yeah.
So, which to her credit, I didn't even think about it.
It's like
and I'm like, oh, we'll bring that up next week for sure.
It's like Alan and I do a recap show for another.
You can say
IB
Sports on Facebook.
IB Sports on Facebook. Which, hey, if you love sports, hop in.
Yep.
But we couldn't do it this week because allegedly he had to take Tristan trick-or-treating. But I think it was the Niners losing a 3rd straight game and Will Levis playing well. I think that's the real reason why.
And don't forget Joe Burrow torching his Niner.
And Joe Burrow.
A lot of grief over Joe Burrow. So
Joe Burrow's awesome. It's just
awesome. All right. Well, Joe, as always, I love doing this with you. I hope our picks continue to be as good as they have been this year. Be sure to check out the DFS Den show. I don't know if they're live tomorrow or if they're recording, but either way, you need to be sure to check that out. And if you have been doing well with our picks, which I had another buddy, I meant to tell you, Joe, I don't know if Donald told you from the IB Sports Group, he made $700 in a DK entry. Yep, with our picks. And I was very, very ecstatic for him. If you have done well playing our picks, all we ask is that you share them with your friends. We enjoy doing this, and obviously want to grow both our audience and Fantasy Six Pack. There's so much solid fantasy football content at Fantasy Six Pack, and again, I think the best DFS team in the biz. And it's not because of me and Joe. I mean, we're good, but
we help.
Yeah, the main course is tomorrow with DFS Den Boys with Chris and Dave Eddy, who are just pros. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening all the way in if you did, and we'll see you soon. And if you seriously go watch the Steelers-Titans game after this is over, don't do it. Go watch Loki's got a new episode out tonight. There's other stuff on TV. Don't fall for that garbage that'll be the Thursday night game. We'll see you guys.